to the stream. I'm glad to see you here. So that was a little bit of echo. Yeah, so hello. Welcome to the stream. I'm glad that you're here. I am Peter, and I got a bright light. Hi, I'm Peter, and welcome to the stream. Today on the stream, we're going to be looking at Zappa. And Zappa is a Python package which can post a web app onto AWS Lambda and allow you to run a web app without starting a virtual private server. So in this live stream today, that's what we're going to be working on, getting a Flask web app to run on AWS Lambda serverless. So before we get going with any coding, I just want to tell you who I am and why I'm doing this. I'm Peter. I teach community college in the Pacific Northwest, and my blog is pythonforundergradengineers.com, and I'm also an author. You can pick up my book on Amazon, Problem Solving with Python, the 3.7 edition. So here is my blog, Python for Undergrad Engineers, and here's my book on Amazon. I'm working on the next edition, the 3.8 edition, because the Anaconda distribution of Python just moved to the 3.8 edition. So that means the book's got to move to the 3.8 edition of Python. If you're following along with this video, you can get any of the code that I write here on my GitHub, Professor Kazarnoff, and then the repo is Stream 2020. And we are in Season 2, Episode 3 today. So any of the code that we do today, you can find in this repo. Before we get started, I just want to go over the code of conduct. So what's up, KJ Miller? Good to see you. You into coding and into Python? How's it going? The code of conduct for this stream. Just everybody be friendly, patient, be welcoming, be considerate, respectful, be careful in the words that you choose, moderate your expectations. I'm not a professional coder. I teach engineering for a living, but I'm going to try to do my best, and this helps me feel like I can reach out and connect with some people. When we disagree, let's try to understand why, and a simple apology can go a long way. And if somebody's violating this code, just send an email to info@problemsolvingwithpython.com. That'll come to me. And just want everybody to feel welcome. So KJ Miller says, yep, into those things. Really looking forward to a bit of Zappa. Open to support more Python content creators. Sweet. So I'm hoping to see if we can get Zappa working, KJ Miller. So let's just quick talk about Zappa. What is Zappa? So Zappa is a Python package which allows you to run serverless web apps on AWS Lambda. And AWS Lambda is Amazon Web Services functions as a service. So usually when you have a Python web app, what you've got to do is create a virtual private server on somewhere like Amazon EC2 or DigitalOcean or Linode. And with Zappa, you don't have to create or manage a server or install any packages on it. The other real awesome thing about Zappa is you can run on the AWS free tier. And so if you've got a little hobby web app, you can do it, run it for free on Zappa, whereas a virtual private server, you're going to have to pay for it unless you've got some free credits somewhere. And I'm all out of my AWS free credits. So that's like our quick introduction to Zappa. And KJ, I really appreciate all the support for all the Python creators. All right, so the blog post that I'm going to be following is from my blog, Python for Undergrad Engineers, and the blog post is titled How to Deploy a Serverless Web App on AWS Lambda with Zappa. So we're going to be roughly following the steps in this stream today, and hopefully by the end of it we're going to have a very simple but working, running web app up on AWS Lambda. So there are a couple things that we're going to have to do. First, we're going to create a repo in Github, and then we're going to create a local folder that links up to that repo, and that's just so we've got somewhere where we can save the code and be able to share it with other people. After we do that, then we're going to work on creating a virtual environment and installing the packages we need to do this little project. And those packages are going to be Flask and Zappa. After that, we'll build a real simple Flask app. It's just going to have a couple lines of text in it, and we'll test it locally. Then after that, what we're going to do is we are going to go through getting AWS credentials. And for me, when I was investigating Zappa, like this was the hardest part, were those AWS credentials. Because I'm not a big AWS user, and figuring out how you can get the credentials and the permissions all set so that you can run your web app up on AWS Lambda. That's the thing that it took me longest to figure out. So we're going to struggle through that together today. Then once we've got those credentials, then we'll create a Zappa settings file, and we'll create requirements.txt, and then we'll deploy up on AWS. And after I get it going, then I'm going to like celebrate a lot, and then we'll change the web app, redeploy it, and then celebrate a lot. So let's get going. So here is a set of code that goes along with the blog post that I wrote, but I'm going to create a new GitHub repo for all the code that we're going to construct. So here I am in github.com, and I click this little plus here, and then new repository. So I'm going to call this maybe Zappa app Flask. Here we go. And this is a simple Flask app deployed serverless on AWS Lambda using Python, using maybe the Python package that's called Zappa. So we'll make this private. We'll initialize it with a README. We'll add the Python gitignore file, and we'll give it a GNU General Public License version 3.0. So it looks like our repository is all ready to create, so I'll click this Create Repository button. And now I've got this repository up on GitHub. So I want to sync this with something that's on my local computer so that all the code I type here locally that will end up back on GitHub and also will allow Zappa to use it. So I'm going to click this little button that says code, and then I'm going to do this clone with SSH. So I'm going to click this button to copy. All right. So now I'm going to go to a terminal, and I'm using the Ubuntu Linux operating system. If you're on Mac OS, you can open the Mac terminal, and if you're on Windows, my advice is always, if you're on Windows, download the Anaconda distribution of Python. And if you do that, then you get the Anaconda prompt, and almost all of the commands that I'm typing here in this Linux terminal, those will work on Windows in the Anaconda prompt. But I'm up here using Ubuntu 20.04. So first I'm going to change into the documents directory, and then we'll make a new directory. And what did we call our repo here? We called it Zappa app Flask. So I'll call my folder that same thing. Zappa app Flask. And then we'll cd into that directory. I can use that little trick. If you know a little bit of what your folder or file name is, if you hit the tab key, then your terminal will auto-complete. So I cd into that Zappa app Flask directory, and then we'll type the commands to initialize a new Git repository. So that's git init. And then we are going to link the remote repo on GitHub to our local repo, this folder. So we'll type git remote add origin, and then I will paste the link. All right. Now if I type git remote -v, it will tell me that I've got this repo linked. And now if I type git pull origin master, it will pull down all that code from GitHub. So if I do an ls now, you can see the license and the README file, and those were the files that are here on GitHub. We've also got this git ignore file. So if we type ls-la, then we'll see all of the hidden files, the one that start with a dot, and we can see the git ignore file. All right. So next what we are going to do is create a Python virtual environment. It's always a good idea when you're coding Python to create a new virtual environment for your project and install packages into that, as compared to installing packages into the system installation of Python on your computer. So there are a couple of different ways to create virtual environments. If you're on Windows and you downloaded Anaconda, you can use the Anaconda prompt and the Conda utility to create virtual environments. Here on my Ubuntu desktop, I'm going to use Python's built-in venv module. And I've got a couple of different versions of Python installed on this computer, but I'm going to be using, I think I'll do Python 3.7. I think. I just don't know for sure what versions of Python AWS Lambda supports. I'm pretty sure it supports 3.7, so that's the one that I'm going to use. All right, so for me, if I type Python 3.7, that will bring me into the Python 3.7 REPL. And that's because I installed Python 3.7 separately. On your computer, you might just type Python For me, that'll give me Python 3.8. So I'm going to type Python 3.7 to create my virtual environment. So if I type Python 3.7-m for module, and then venv, that's the module I want to run, and then I want to create a venv directory that contains my virtual environment. Some people call this env or .env. I'm calling mine venv. And then if you type source venv, that's the directory, bin, and activate, that'll activate the virtual environment. And you can tell that the virtual environment is active because you've got venv here in front of our prompt. Now if I type ls, I can see this venv directory that contains my Python virtual environment. Alright, so now we're ready to install the two packages that we need for this project. So we need Flask and we need Zappa. So I'm going to type python-m pip install Flask, and this will install Flask into our virtual environment. And when you install a virtual environment, I don't know a way around this. It always puts this older version of pip in there. So we're also going to run that command, python-m pip install --upgrade pip. And this will just upgrade pip to the newest version, and then it won't give me this warning. Okay, so we've installed Flask. Now let's install Zappa. So I'll type python-m pip install, and then Zappa. So while that's installing, I'll take a little drink. Alright, both of those packages are installed. So let's check them. So if we type Python, and then we do import Flask, then we call Flask --version. That should give us a Flask version. If we do import Zappa, and then we call Zappa --version. Zappa has no attribute version. That's because I spelled it incorrectly. Version. There we go. That gives me a version 2. Not every single Python package, but a lot of Python packages, if you just import the main package name and then do that main name _version, that will often give you the version of the package. It doesn't work for every single package, but a lot of them, that's the way that the creators make them. So let's get out of the Python prompt, the Python REPL, by typing exit and open parentheses, close parentheses. When I started coding Python, I always wanted to just do exit, and that doesn't work. You gotta do exit, open parentheses, close parentheses. Okay, so now we're ready to do some coding. Let's build a super simple Flask app. And this Flask app is the app that we're gonna deploy on AWS Lambda. Oh, and I misspelled Zap right there. I did Zap app Flask. Well, for right now, we'll just leave it. Okay, so I've got VS Code installed on this machine. VS Code is a free code editor, and I think it's pretty good. You can use it to write Python code as well as many other types of programming code. So before we continue, let's make sure that our venv module here is ignored in our gitignore file, because we do not want to save all of this virtual environment stuff up in GitHub. So if I click the gitignore file and I scroll down here, we can see that there's this environment section and ignores the entire venv directory. And also here on VS Code, the directory here is grayed out, and that means in VS Code, at least in my installation, that that code isn't going to go up to GitHub. Okay, cool. So I can close the gitignore file. And now let's create a super simple Flask app. So I'll create a Flask app, and let's call it app.py. And I'll put a comment up here. So what does my little note here say? We selected a Python environment. Do you want to select it to start up the features of Python extension? I think I feel good about that, yeah. And it asks me, do I want to install Pylint? Yeah, let's install Pylint. So in the background here, that's going to do the installation into our virtual environment. Okay, so at the top of my app.py file, that's going to contain our super simple Flask app. I'll just put a comment here with the file name. And then we'll start coding. So I am not a professional web developer. I don't know my Flask off the top of my head. So I'm going to go to the blog post here. And take a look at this code. So we're going to import the Flask class, and then we'll create an instance of this Flask class. So let's do that first. So from Flask, import Flask, and then app is equal to Flask dunder name. All right. Whoops. So from Flask, import Flask, and then we'll create an instance of app is equal to Flask dunder name. Alright, so after we create that app instance, then we can create our first route. So if you do this at app.route decorator, then that means a web address. And then we'll apply as an argument just a slash. So this means the home page, which is the only page that we're going to use for our super simple Flask web app. So at app.route, and then just a slash as the argument. So at app.route, and then just a simple slash as the argument. And then we'll create a very simple function that's going to return some sort of pseudo HTML. Okay. So we could call it hello world for our function title, and then we'll return some simple HTML. We'll do def hello world, and then we'll return we'll give it a h1 tag. That'll make the text a little bit bigger. And then we'll say hello from Zappa and the stream. pretty simple. You could put any text that you want in there. And I need to end my h1 tag here. There we go. Give that a save. Okay. So last, we just have to make it so that our Flask app will run if we call it. So we'll just do this for local development. I don't think you have to do this for Zappa, but we'll do the if dunder name is equivalent to dunder main, then we'll do app dot run. All right, app dot run. So we'll give this a save. And I'll just look over it real quick. We've got a comment at the top for our name. Then we import the Flask class from the Flask library, create an instance of that Flask class. We have one simple route. We define a function that just returns some HTML in h1 tags. And then down here at the bottom, this is something common to a lot of Python scripts. You do if name is equivalent to main, then do app.run. And what that means is basically if this Python file gets run, then its dunder underscore name will be equivalent to main, and then the app will run. So next, what we can do is make sure that this runs locally, and then bring up a web browser so we can see it. So on the command line, as long as Flask is installed, we should be able to type Flask Run in order to get our app running in a web browser. So if I type ls now, you can see this app.py file. So let's type Flask Run. And it says, warning, this is development server, don't use this in deployment. Okay, so we just have to browse to this URL. So you can do this IP address or localhost, and Flask typically runs on port 5000. Other Python web packages, some of them run on port 8000, but Flask runs on port 5000. Okay, so let's open up a web browser, and we get it. Hello from Zappa and the stream. So let's maybe modify like our Flask app, and then see if our simple text here in our web browser is modified. So maybe hello from Zappa and P. Kazarnoff and the stream. So we'll give that a save. And now if we go back here, I think I have to redeploy. So I'm going to hit Control C to cancel, and then type Flask Run. Little trick is that you can type the up arrow, and that'll give you the last run command if you're using a terminal. So I click the upper arrow, that gives me Flask Run. And now let's go back, refresh, and it says hello from Zappa and P. Kazarnoff and the stream. Awesome. Alright, so we got our very simple Flask app to run locally. That means it's time to take a drink of water. Let's hold on a sec here. Okay, so I kind of feel like we're like a third of the way there. We wrote our code locally and we ran our code locally, and we're able to see our little Flask website here locally. So that's good and all, but really the whole purpose of the stream today is to deploy this up on Zappa, deploy this with Zappa up on AWS Lambda and run our Flask app serverless. Okay, so in order to do this, we've got to get a couple things together. So one thing is we got to make sure we've got a requirements.txt file. I'm also going to stick in a runtime.txt file. I don't know if Zappa is going to look at it, but I'm going to stick that in there too. And then after that, we're going to dive into the wild, crazy world of AWS permissions. Okay, so in order to save a requirements.txt file, we'll type the command python-m pip and then freeze, and then we'll pipe that over to requirements.txt. Now if we do ls, we've got this requirements.txt file. The requirements.txt file is a very common file in Python projects that holds all of your Python dependencies that you've installed with pip. The other file that I want to create, I don't know if it's really going to make a difference, but the version of Python in this virtual environment is 3.7.4. So I'm going to try creating a runtime.txt and see if Zappa reads that. So up here, do runtime.txt, and then do Python, and then dash. This is the way that it's done with Heroku, so I'm going to see maybe Zappa will read this. Okay, so we've got those files, and let's make sure our app is saved. Let's push all of this stuff up to GitHub. So first I want to add it all into Git. So I'll type git add dot, and then we'll commit it. So that's the command git commit, and then -m for your commit message. And we'll type add app.py requirements.txt and runtime.txt. And then we'll type git push origin master. And this will push our code up to GitHub. I've got a SSH key saved on this machine, and that SSH key is saved up on GitHub, so I don't have to type my username or password when I push code up to GitHub. I find that really convenient, but if you're following along, you might have to type your username or your password. So let's go over here to GitHub and our Zappa Flask App repo. Let's reload it. And now we can see that our app.py file that we wrote, that's saved up here on GitHub. And also our requirements.txt and our runtime.txt file. Those are saved up on GitHub as well. Sweet. Okay, so now we're kind of moving into the second third of the stream, And what we're going to have to do is mess around with AWS permissions so that we can eventually be able to get the credentials in order to deploy our app with Zappa on AWS Lambda. Now there probably are like easier ways to do this, but I tried to do this in a way where we weren't sort of leaking security out. So tried to give constrained permissions when we're deploying this app instead of having an AWS user that can do just about anything. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at the blog post, and we're going to go over the general steps, and then we're going to see if I can recreate them up on AWS. All right. So the general steps to create an AWS access key ID and secret access key. These are the two things that we want to get at the end of all this. We just need a secret access key ID and a secret access key. So in order to do this, we'll sign in to the AWS Management Console and then go into the IAM service, which is Amazon's permission service, Amazon's permission dashboard. And then once we're in there, what we're going to do is we're going to create a group, and then we're going to attach an inline policy to that group. Then we will create a user and add that user to the group, and then we will copy the access key ID and the secret access key from the user. Alright, so what does all that mean in AWS? So I had to really get this stuff straight when I originally did this deployment. So AWS has accounts. So an account is just one person that has a AWS account. It's like a username and password that you log in and sign up to AWS with. But accounts aren't the same thing as users in AWS. Users are something different. So each account can have multiple users associated with it. So say for example, like your company has an AWS account, but there are 5 different developers that work and all use that account. Each one of those developers, they could be a different user. So users have access key IDs and secret access keys. And those users will be allowed to do certain things. But how do those users get access to be able to do certain things? Well, users can be assigned to groups, and there can be multiple groups within one account on AWS, and multiple users can be in a group, and a user could be part of multiple groups. Say you wanted to have one group for like, I don't know, database stuff, and one group for like Amazon S3 stuff. And 2 people have to be able to do like the database stuff, and like these 3 people have to do the S3 stuff. S3 is Amazon's simple file storage. And you could have like people that are shared, and they've got access like to both of those groups. So you can assign permissions to both groups or users. I'm going to be assigning a permission to a group. And permissions are like a little bit of thing that you're allowed to do in AWS. So for instance, one permission could allow you to upload files to an S3 bucket. Or maybe another permission could allow you to shut down an Amazon EC2 instance. Or maybe another permission would allow you to create like a new EC2 server, for instance. So a permission is just like a little piece of work that one person, can be assigned either to a group, a user, or a policy. So generally, groups and users have to be able to do multiple things, not just one like little thing. So like if they're using S3, they'd want to be able to upload to S3, download from S3, and then maybe set the permissions of files in S3, and maybe allow new users to use S3, for instance. So you could combine all of that, all of those permissions together into a policy, and that policy could be assigned to a group, and then that group, an individual user could be part of that group and have that policy that contains all the permissions allow them to do that work. AWS also has this thing that's called a managed policy. So a managed policy is a policy that's created by Amazon, and it's got like what Amazon considers like a good grouping of different permissions all stuck together. So they might have an S3 policy that Amazon groups together all of the stuff for S3. So like for instance, for AWS Lambda, AWS has this managed policy that's the AWS Lambda full access, and that allows a group and a user that's part of that group to do basically anything with AWS Lambda. So if you don't want to use the managed policies that are created by AWS, you can write your own inline policy. So an inline policy are permissions that are all grouped together by you personally, and you can like pick and choose different permissions. And I think actually you can even pick and choose managed policies to be part of your inline policy. And that allows you to like customize a policy. It's like an AWS managed policy, but like a personally managed policy. And these inline policies, they are formed in JSON format. Alright, so let's see if I can do this. So first we'll create a group, and then we'll assign an inline policy to the group. Then we'll create a user and add the user to the group, and then that user will have the access keys that we'll need to deploy, so that we can deploy Zappa. So here is the AWS management screen, and you get here just by going to aws.amazon.com. Whoops. And if you click Sign into Console, it'll bring you into the AWS Management Console. If you don't have an account, you can create one on AWS, and you get some free credits if you're signing up for the first time. So I've already logged in to my account here on AWS. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for the IAM, which is Amazon's access management platform. Alright, so here we are in the Amazon Identity and Access Management Platform. So we're going to first create a group, and then we'll add an inline policy to that group, and then we'll add a user to that group so that the user will have that inline policy. So I'll click on groups, and for right now I'm going to delete that Zappa group. So we'll create a new group, and we'll call the group Zappa Flask App, and then I'll go down here and click Next Step. Then it says select one or more policies. So these are all the managed policies. So I'm not going to select any of these managed policies. I'm going to create my own inline policy. So then I'll click Next. So here under policies, that's that. Okay, I'll do inline policy separate. Okay, and then I'll create group. So we've got our Flask app group. So now let's create a policy. So I'm clicking on policies, and I'll click create policy, and then I'll click this JSON, and then I'm going to copy the policy that I had from the blog post. So here in the blog post, there is the JSON for one of these managed policies. Excuse me, inline policies. So I'll do copy and then paste. So this has got a couple things in it, but it's about creating a policy, and then it allows the group that has this policy and then users that are part of this group to use Amazon's API gateway, Lambda, some CloudFormation stuff, some logs, and then this Route 53, that's if you wanted to put your own web address, like your own domain name. And this is all complete except for this XXXX portion here. So if I click Review Policy, it says this policy is and it says that. So I'm going to go back to 1, and the only thing I need to change is this XXXXX part right here. So in the blog post, what you have to do is put your account number into that XXXX part, and you can find your account number by clicking Support Center, and it's also probably in other places on the AWS management console. So I'm going to go back here to the AWS management console, and I'm going to click the little private screen, and then I'm going to get my AWS account number, and then what I'll do is I'll paste it in right here. Alright, so let's get the private screen up there. Alright, so I'm just going to my account, and I'm copying my account ID, and then I'll go back to AIM and go back to my policies and go back to create policy and JSON. And now I will paste in. Okay, and then I'll click Review Policy. Now we can go back to the main screen. So it looks like our policy is okay. So we'll call our policy Zappa AWS Lambda policy, and then we'll say a IAM policy to allow a group or a user access to create an AWS Lambda serverless web app using Zappa. Probably doesn't have to be all that specific, but so I've created my policy. Now I need to link my policy to my group. So I'm going to go back to groups. I'll click on the group name. I'll click here to permissions, and then I'll click attach policy. So it'll ask me what policy I would like to attach. Select one or more policies. You can have 10 policies attached. Well, I want to attach like my policy. Okay. Inline policies. There are no inline policies to show, but I just created an inline policy. Oh man. Alright, I guess I have to do this again. There's probably a way to get around this. So Zappa Lambda deploy policy. So I'll go back to the blog post again. Copy all this. Copy. Paste. And then I'll get my Amazon ID one more time. Gotta go to private. So I'm clicking my account, and I got my ID. Now I'm pasting my ID into where those X's are. Then I'm going to click validate policy in line 1. Ooh, I somehow do not have an opening curly brace. Let's try to validate now. Policy is valid. So it said that after I validated my policy, that my policy is valid. So now I'll click Apply Policy. So my Zappa Flask App group now has this group policy. Alright, okay. So we got our group, we got our policy. Now we just have to create a user and add the user to the group. So I'll go here to users. For now, we'll delete this user. Just delete. And we'll create a new user. So we'll call this Flask Zappa AWS Lambda user. And we want programmatic access. We want an access key ID and a secret access key. So we'll click that for type. And next, we'll create permissions. And we'll do that by add the user to a group. So we'll stick them on our Flask App group that has our Zappa Lambda deploy policy on it. Next, for tags, I'm just going to leave this blank. And after this, we will create the user. So it's possible when I do create user that it'll show the secret access key and the access ID, and I don't want to show that over the stream. So I'm going to do the private real quick here, and then click create user. Alright, so we've got our secret access key ID. I'm going to copy that and quick type secrets.txt, and then copy the secret access key, copy that, give that a save. Alright, and now I'm going to click close. Alright, so we're back here on the user screen, and we created this Flask Zappa AWS Lambda user that's part of our Zappa Flask app group that has a secret access key and secret access key ID. And then I saved that here into the secrets.txt file, and I gotta make sure that I add secrets.txt to gitignore. Definitely do not want to share these. Secrets.txt. And since I added that to the gitignore for the local repo, it's gone gray here. Alright, so we've got to store these locally so that when we run Zappa, Zappa knows which secret keys it should use. So I'm going to go back to the blog post. And the place that we need to save these is in a .aws credentials file. So we need to create a file in .aws credentials. So I'm going to create like a credentials file in the repo, just so if you're following along with the stream, you know where you've like what format it's got to be in. And we're gonna have default, and then our AWS access key ID, and AWS secret access key. So I'm going to create these, I think, with Nano, the text editor that's built into Linux. So I'm going to cd into my home directory. So /home Peter. Then I'm going to make a directory called .aws. And if we do ls-la, we can see that we've got a AWS directory. Then we'll cd into the .aws directory. And then we'll create a file called credentials, no file extension. And then in this file, we'll copy this stuff from our default. Copy. And then I'm going to paste in my AWS access key ID and my AWS secret access key from the AWS IAM console. But I'm going to put the private screen up when I do it. So I'm going to take out these X's and I'm going to put in the actual secret keys. Alright, so I'm grabbing from the secrets file first the access key ID, pasted that in, and now I need my secret access key. So I'm copying that from my secrets file, and then gonna go here, erase all those X's, and then paste that in. So I'll do Control X for exit, and then Y, and then right. Alright. So that should create that credentials file, and now if I do an ls, we can see the credentials file. Alright, so now we're ready sort of to get our deployment going. We finished the first third. That was doing our creating our repo, installing our packages, and then also doing building our Flask app. And then we did the second part that was all our AWS credential stuff, logging into the AWS management console, creating a group, attaching an inline policy, creating a user, adding the user to the group, and then saving those credentials to the .aws credentials file. So we're like 2/3 of the way there. Time to take a little sip of water. when something's deploying for a long time, that means that I get to have a snack. Whoa! That was fast! That was so fast. Alright, let's browse here to our website. Copy the link. Let's go to web browser. And note, we're going to be looking for this, but not running locally, like running on a live internet site. Woohoo! Oh, yeah. Awesome. It worked. All right. So let's change the code, and then let's redeploy. So one of the awesome things about Zappa is that redeployment is super, super easy. Wait for the snack until the redeploy. Okay. So I'll make sure the Zappa settings.json is saved. I don't need the git ignore right now. So this is hello from Zappa, enough, and the stream. And maybe we could now say hello from Zappa. We are running live on the internet. So I gave that a save. And then if we type here Zappa -- help again, and then we'll do Zappa update dev this time. Zappa update dev means it's time for another snack here. But I think this will be pretty quick. So when it finishes this deployment, it's not authorized to provide delete function concurrency. Oh boy, I don't know what that means. Error occurred, access denied, exception, delete function concurrency. Let's just try if we do a Zappa update dev, see if that works. Just try it like one more time. And also, at least for right now, I'll copy that and close the web browser. I don't know if that makes any difference, but so do save. Zappa update dev. So it looks like the zip, that part is going good. And that didn't work because Lambda delete function concurrency. Alright. Okay. So there's something going on with our policy, and we need to have this Lambda delete function concurrency in the policy. So stick with me. Let's see if we can like troubleshoot this in like 10 minutes. And if not, we'll just have to save it for the stream next week. Alright, so let's go back to the AWS console. And then we'll click on our group here. And then I'm going to click on Edit Policy, but that'll bring up possibly my AWS okay. Alright, so we can go back. So I'm going to add this thing here. The Lambda delete function concurrency. Alright, so let's validate. Policy is valid. Let's apply. Policy is applied. So our user should still be part of that group that the policy is applied to. Let's see if we can run this again. Zappa update dev. I'm running out of snacks, so this better work. The zipping seems to be going totally fine, so but it's okay. So that still didn't work. I'm wondering, maybe it just takes a second for these AIM policies to work. If I do show policy, effect allow action. I'm just looking through the policy here. Lambda update function configuration. I can get the function configuration, update function configuration. It looks like it should be okay. And our users, they're still in that group. Alright, so I guess I'll just try our deploy one more time. And we've gotten this zip to go. And let's see if we can this looks much better. Sweet! Alright. So I guess that blog post has to be updated, but I'll save all the policy details in the GitHub repo. So let's go to this URL, copy, back to our web browser. So when we're running locally, that's what it says. And with our updated code, yeah, awesome. We are running live on the internet. So if we go back here, we are running live on the internet. Let's do a change, maybe for real, and do one more update before we end the stream. Deploying stuff to Zappa is just so easy. Up arrow. And it'll do that zip again. And what we're looking for here is this for real. That's what it should say when it updates. All right, so let's refresh. For real! Awesome! All right. Well, thank you so much for sitting in on the stream. Always enjoy getting the comments and then the support for other Python creators. And I'll look up commenters, see if you've got some Python content out there, because I really want to learn some new things too. So this concludes the stream for today. Thanks a lot for watching, and thanks a lot for listening. Bye for now.